Well, welcome to With All Due Respect, where we have the ambition of discussing theology and culture with grace and respect. And I'm Megan. You didn't like my little tie-in.
I see what you did there.
I'm Megan Powell-Dutoit, and
I'm Michael Jensen.
And Michael, would you see yourself as an ambitious man?
Yeah, I would confess that I am, and
I think you are too.
I'm interested in this episode because I feel it's going to be therapy for me.
I'm not sure. Would you say I'm ambitious?
You have ambitions.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay, we'll pull that out more. I'm not sure I see myself as an ambitious woman, but I know that people do view me that way at times. Well, earlier this year, the Canadian PM Mark Carney said in a speech, "It seems that every day we're reminded that we live in an era of great power rivalry, that the rules-based order is fading, that the strong can do what they can and the weak must suffer what they must." And this, I think, accords with my own feeling that we're kind of back in less of a rule-based order that had really been around since sort of the Second World War, and we've now come back into more of an age of empires, sort of an age of ambition, whether by individuals or by nations, and I think it's just sort of running rampant. Now, ambition is one of those really ambivalent words, isn't it, Michael?
It is. It's not quite, is it negative or isn't it? It's one of the mysteries we'll try and unpick
today, yes. So we're going to discuss together whether ambition is godly or ungodly. And then we're going to speak with the widely acclaimed and influential theologian, Professor Miroslav Volf, who's got a book out on the subject, before relishing in the ambitious family of TV show The Forsytes.
For argument's sake, where we take a debate, cut out the party politics and try to talk it out. Now, the 18th century Scottish philosopher David Hume said of ambition that it is the most incurable and inflexible of passions. That's my David Hume accent.
That didn't even sound Scottish.
He was, Edinburgh, not Glasgow,
right,
you see.
Okay, sure.
He said it in his book on the history of England, which will make sense when you consider that history, especially given he was a Scot, it can be considered either a virtue or a vice. Aristotle, for his part, classified it as a virtue, but then added a whole sweep of hedging qualifications. Well, on the other hand, the great Christian theologian philosopher Thomas Aquinas viewed it as a sin, as excessive desire for personal honour. So, Megan, is ambition divine or inherently ungodly or somewhere in between?
I mean, it gets used in a very broad fashion, the word. I think these days, it's broadened out as a word within the English understanding. And then even when you look at English translations of the Bible, the word ambition gets used to translate different Greek words, right?
Yeah, both positive and negative ones.
Both positive and negative. So part of it is just kind of going, what do we actually mean when we talk about ambition?
Ambition. Yes.
It's not the whole thing, because I think there's even some qualifications on that. But that's the first thing, I think. So what do you think it means?
Well, I mean, I think you're right. It's an English word. It can mean any sort of forward desire, that kind of your any aim that you have.
Or a goal, yeah.
Or a person who has goals is an ambitious person. And we see, one commonly reported or complained about vice is someone who lacks ambition, is a person who seems dissolute, just doesn't really get out of bed in the morning. We complain about the sort of Gen Z.
Well, James K.A. Smith talks about the opposite of ambition as being sloth.
Well, yes. We complain about the vice of Gen Z, allegedly. This is a myth, for no offence to any Gen Zs out
and
there.
being said about every young generation
please
as they
do
go.
wipe the corn chips off your tracksuit pants and get out. Yeah, we that's what we feel, is that a young person might, a slothly young person without ambition might end up not doing anything. And that's a worry. There's a vice there. So we can see that ambition has its uses. The key is what the ambition is for, I think. What is it directed towards? And there is a kind of ambition, a kind of motivating that we indulge in that's actually quite deleterious, quite toxic. And I think especially when it comes to the ambition to be better than others, to the denigration of others.
What is it? Is it just at the expense of others? Because I wonder whether inherently, if you are wanting to be better than others, there's almost an inherent sense of denigrating others. because it's a comparative exercise.
Well, is it wrong for Usain Bolt to want to win the 100 metres? I know he's now retired, but is it wrong for him? I mean, he has to beat everybody else. And sport is inherently competitive. That's the nature of it.
Well, I'm not a sporty person, so it's probably not the way to win me over in this argument. But I do think, is your motivation, because if you think of sport, and some of the great sort of scandals of sport are to do with people who want to win at any cost, right?
Yes.
And is his motivation primarily to win the race, or is the primary resolution that he has to be the fastest, to beat his own personal best, for instance, to see what he can do? So there's a complexity, isn't there? Like once you start trying to beat other people, it's very hard in a sinful world
yes,
to keep the denigration of others out of it. I think this is when, like, ambition, even when we might see it as a good ambition, can be quite destructive or dangerous, or temptations involved.
It kind of awakens something dark in our hearts, doesn't it? So this is the confessional part. I find actually that I'm quite motivated by competition and particularly by the idea that I'm competing with someone else. I remember this at high school. I kind of studied hard because I wanted to be the first, and I kind of would focus on, I bet he's studying hard, I better study hard as well. But I don't think that didn't awaken the best in me. Mind you, I didn't go around and kind of try and undermine them, for instance. I didn't kind of try and, do what, steroid-taking athletes do. I wasn't kind of cheating to get ahead. But you can see where it's the winning at any costs because I must be better than the other person, or the whole thing's a failure. That's where.
Yeah, that's when, and
winning is the only purpose of this thing.
So one of my favourite games, which I could never get anyone to play with me when I was growing up, was a game where everybody was the winner. It was like a cooperative game. And the only way I could get my twin brother to play it with me is if I played a game of Monopoly.
The most brutal of all
Which
games.
I hated Monopoly because it's really, how can I drag everyone else down so I, am up the top? And I love this game that was the opposite of that. But I found it very hard to get takers. But interestingly, that means that for me, actually, part of my spiritual journey was learning how to be ambitious for God.
Okay. Well, now this is interesting because that's a different there's a target there, isn't there?
Yes.
There's a kind of a desire for God. That's not about the means, it's about the target, isn't there? Because you could have a kind of a desire for God that's warped as well, right?
Yeah, well, I was just sort of thinking, so if you think of how Paul talks about ambition, and remembering here it's different words. So when he talks about a negative ambition, it's often translated as selfish ambition, which is erythia.
Yeah, erythia.
Yeah. Then that isn't really – that in itself has – inside that word is the target built in, right? It is the ambition is for the self.
Yes, it's selfish ambition. Yeah, that's right.
But there's other words translated – of ambition, which might be better translated aspiration or desire or something, where Paul talks about his desire for God's purposes, right?
Yeah, Romans 15 is the classic case where he sort of his desire is to preach the gospel in all circumstances. And that's often the ambition is the English word, which just confuses us because there's a different word underneath it, which is hard to say, but contains phil in it. Philotomai.
Philo, so love,
which, so there's a love aspect in it.
So a passionate or a zealous desire,
Yeah, zeal is another interesting biblical concept which is there. I mean, zeal is huge in the Bible, but it's a zeal for the Lord's house. It's a zeal that will consume me, says Jesus.
Yeah. So I think for me too, there was sort of, and I think maybe this is a bit of a gendered reaction too. I do feel like we want ambition in men, but we're kind of uncomfortable with it in women. And so I became uncomfortable with it in myself. And then I did really have a turning point at one point in which I kind of go on the other hand, it's not that I want to do things for myself, I want them to do them for God, and there is a temptation there. But then withdrawing completely from then dreaming big dreams for God or wanting to do things for God that are new, challenges and so on. That's a kind of good ambition. And I'd really struggled with having that ambition. And because, I actually am naturally a bit slothful. So, my ambition, if you like, my desire often that I'm going against is I just want to go and bake a cake and sit there with my cat and read a book, right? But that doesn't in itself really work out most of God's purposes in the world if I just did that, right?
No. Well, I mean, it work out some. God's purpose to have cakes and cats.
Yeah, the good enjoyment of cakes.
Sabbath is a sort of Sabbath ambition. Yeah. This is worth untangling because you see the kind of megachurch movement. I would have to say, even in the pastoral world I'm in, that there's a sort of there's a requirement that you be an ambitious pastor to grow your church, and we can say that's a godly desire. We can kind of see that in terms of Paul's desire here.
Yes,
but it can turn into a selfish ambition.
It's very. That's the thing where
it's got a pious swoosh on it.
Yeah, that's why I wouldn't want to just say, oh, there's a positive and negative. As long as you're doing the positive one, that's fine, because it's so easy, isn't it, to kind of go from. Yes, I want our podcast to succeed, so that
yes, please do subscribe, pass it on to your friends.
So we can have a good effect, or we're hoping a good effect within the church in Australia. But also, as you're watching that, you're looking at things like numbers and going, what kind of numbers do we have? And it's so easy.
Are you admitting that we look at our numbers?
We do. Sometimes I forget. The sloth takes over and I don't look. But and it's very easy to then start pursuing numbers. Right. And they're the same as I'm a church pastor as well. And as the senior, I think particularly, because how other people are going to judge you, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a terrible pastors' conference when there's a sort of comparison exercise, which is, so how large is your church?
Yeah, how large is your church? Yeah.
300, really? Oh, interesting. And that kind of is there's something deeply unhealthy about that, because it's a sort of ambition curved inward. It's that sort of ambition turned in. And also the hard part about it is it's sort of like ambition, not ambitious for God as God the object, but ambitious on behalf of God. Not having God's ambitions, but having our own ambitions.
And God's ambitions could be quite different from ours. Like God could want a lot of us to sit there with cats.
He could, yeah.
Not completely. There are other things to do. But, like we kind of would immediately go, oh, that's not God's ambitions, but because we read our ambitions back onto God.
Certainly. I mean, absolutely we do, because we're so again, that's really hard not to do that.
So I feel like that with coming back to, I started off with an intro about the nation state and being quite ambitious, the age of empires, kind of rearing its ugly head again. And I think that it's really sad for me when that gets connected in with sort of Christianity and our sort of Christian nationalist kind of viewpoint, because it kind of assumes that our ambitions for our nation would be God's ambitions, that God would want the nation to be successful in the way that it would be on the world arena. But, of course, I don't necessarily I don't think that at all. I don't think that's God's ambitions for the world at all.
No. And I think maybe this is a good place to turn to Philippians chapter 2.
Yes.
Where Paul says, do nothing out of erythea, selfish ambition, but instead have the same mind as Christ. And, of course, that's the pattern of Christ emptying himself, and yet he's exalted, right? So this is the path of victory goes through the cross, and so there is a sort of ambition, but it's an ambition shaped by love, an ambition, giving himself for the sake of others. It's not a selfish ambition; it's an unselfish ambition, and that's the path. That's what the New Testament advocates. That's what Christ models for us.
And it's a very weird ambition, isn't it? It's a very weird ambition to go to the cross.
Yes. It's a determination,
yes,
isn't it?
Yeah.
And it is a weird ambition, yet that's to be our weird ambition.
We have to take up our crosses too. Yes. So it really, like many things in a sort of a gospel-shaped life, gospel-shaped church, you can take the same concepts from the world, but they get overturned and reframed, reimagined. Yeah. Well, still to come, Miroslav Volf's book on ambition is called The Cost of Ambition. So next up, we're going to ask him what that cost is and whether it's ever possible to avoid paying it. Then we watch a show in which a family were quite prepared to pay all sorts of costs for their ambitions. our guest opening up the conversation to others. Miroslav Volf is Professor of Theology and Director of the Yale Center for Faith and Culture at Yale University. He previously taught at the Evangelical Theological Seminary in his native Croatia and also at Fuller Theological Seminary in the US. The author of many books, he's perhaps best known for his 1996 book about identity and reconciliation, Exclusion and Embrace, which was named by Christianity Today as one of the 100 most influential books of the 20th century.
It's certainly been one of the top 10 books influential on me, I'd say.
Yeah, it's an incredible work. Volf has also served as an advisor for the White House Office of Faith-Based Enabled Partnerships. So, guys, he's quite a successful person in the theology world.
I know.
So he's perhaps then very well placed to speak to us about the cost of ambition, which is the title of his latest book.
Welcome to With All Due Respect, Miroslav Volf. It's so great to have you with us.
Oh, it's very good to be with you. I'm delighted, honored.
Well, I wanted to start with a personal question. Who are you tempted to compare yourself to?
You know what? I sometimes tease or say in jest that most of the books that I write for myself.
Yes.
There is something in me that needs addressing. So they're kind of spiritual exercises in certain sense. And I'm fairly competitive as a person and often don't think necessarily that that's a very good thing in me, the nature of competitiveness. And so I might find myself comparing with just about anybody, depending on the situation. And I kind of push then gently against that. Whether that's in my professional field, or it is when I'm in the gym or anywhere else for that matter.
And you're, of course, arguing the book that striving to be better than others often sort of paradoxically makes us worse. What do you think? Why do you think comparison has such a hold on us?
Wow, that's a really would be a long answer to give, but I'll start and then maybe we can continue a discussion. Comparison, we're social beings, and as social beings, we seek recognition. As social beings, we also are in competition for relatively scarce resources. And I think all that pushes us to a certain form of competition, so that one finds competitiveness just about everywhere. And if one looks in the sacred text, in the Bible, one finds it at the very beginning of the story with Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, first two brothers. They're kind of competing for recognition. If one is to believe John Milton, Eve and Adam were competing, and that was in a part of a reason for their fall. So I think it's their question is, what do we do with this fact of our lives in the scarce environments, living as social beings?
Now, I don't want to make this a confessional, but I have to say this has been a very challenging read for me personally. I think I'm quite a competitive person. I realize how often I'm looking over at the next guy or girl, and that's motivated me. I find it a very successful motivator. Now, you distinguish between striving for excellence and striving for superiority. Now, how can ordinary people tell which one is driving how can we tell which one is driving us? How can you tell the difference in your own heart?
Well, sometimes it's not easy to make that or tell that difference. They bleed into one another. But I always ask myself, is what I'm striving after some independent good that I can affirm? Or am I just comparing myself, seeing that I'm not as good at whatever that is that somebody is doing, and then trying to beat that person? Is my goal beating the person, or is my goal somehow improvement in what is a genuinely valuable thing? And if I'm trying to improve in what is genuinely valuable thing, I'm striving for excellence. And maybe another person can be also a spur for me to move forward. But I'm less worried about genuine value and comparison than I am when comparisons where striving for superiority becomes a dominant value. That's the kind of basic target of the book. When it starts dominating, I think it's a ruinous for us.
So a lot of contemporary ethical reasoning is kind of consequentialist, isn't it? It says, well, it doesn't matter what your motive is. What matters really is the outcome. Is Christian ethics fundamentally different to that?
I would argue that it is. Recently, I was reading a book together with students in a class called "What is Love?" by evolutionary biologist who tries to argue that altruism itself should be judged on consequences and not on motivations. And when you look in the Christian tradition and you see how significant motivation is, and indeed how sometimes even consequences can be disregarded, you see how different it is. One of the best examples that I know is the story of this widow who gave to the temple 2 pennies, 2 smallest coins of the empire, whereas the rich people were giving great sums of money. And then, if consequentialism is that by which we went, she's given virtually nothing. That was kind of wasted money that she gave, whereas other people have given a great sum. Jesus says actually she's given more than any of them, and the reason for it that she's given everything.
Well, I was just about to say that I wonder whether one of the consequences that's being ignored in that whole argument is the consequences to the internal person, perhaps, and so the wounds being carried by the internal person. And what kind of wounds do you think are being inflicted or maybe being acted out by a competitive culture?
Yeah, I think competitive culture, to the extent that we always assess our value in competitive ways, to that extent, we are either excited about being better than somebody, or we look down on somebody. So that these, and often both at the same time. So that our entire lives, in some ways, move between these 2 gazes. One is up in maybe envy, in striving. The other one is down in kind of despising the other person, or down on oneself in self-loathing. Maybe sometimes these emotions are not as strong as I'm describing them, but nonetheless, there's a kind of fundamentally negative relation that I have to others, even to my competitors. I want to be better than they are. So the entirety of my endeavor has this negative valency to it. I want the other person to be lesser and lower than I am. I want to be better than they. So it is an aggressive stance, even if it doesn't immediately seem like that.
So the gospel helps us here by casting our value as individual, as in we are worth what we're worth because of God's love, not because God says we're worth, rather than because of our achievements, etc. I guess some people might say yes, but that's not particular. God does that with everybody, so I don't feel particularly special. How would you help them pastorally?
That's wonderful. So how do I satisfy pastorally their desire to be better than somebody else? Is that what you're asking?
Well, to feel particularly worth as them. I think the thing about superiority is it's me, it's my achievements specific to me, as opposed to, well, God loves everybody. Jesus died for the world.
Well, God loves for everybody, but everybody is not the same. That is to say, God's love, I don't think we have a good reason to cast God's love as some kind of a generic thing that God throws over the world and it falls equally on everyone. But it seems that we can very much think of it as something specific. Think of the saying that is in the Gospel of Luke about these 2 sparrows that are worth 5 pennies, right? Or I think, or 5 sparrows, 2 pennies. I think it's the other way. 5 sparrows are worth 2 pennies, but not one of them is forgotten by God.
Mm-mm.
Now this kind of remembering of the specificity of the one is really fundamental. And I think we each, as my colleague here at Yale, John Hare, moral philosopher, would say, and he's building on the famous medieval philosopher Scotus, uh, each of us has a generic nature, but each of us has also a specific nature. And we are each particular and inexchangeable. And because we are such, we are also loved as such. And I think every good parent who has more than one child seeks to love each child in a way that is appropriate to the specific characteristics of that child, equally rejoicing in each one of them, and yet loving specifically each as they are themselves. And so that particularity is affirmed, celebrated indeed.
Yes, that's my father, who has 24 grandchildren, goes around to each one of them and whispers, "Don't tell the others, but you're my favorite."
Have to think about that one.
Yeah, there we go.
Michael's father was the former archbishop, so there's a whole lot there. So what I was about to say, though, I was really interested in picking up on that particularity and the fact that already you've used a couple of stories from the Gospels, and I wonder whether the narratives of the Gospels show us the particularity of God being enacted, I suppose, in those contexts that Jesus was in his earthly ministry.
Yeah, I think so. I think even the very act of incarnation is honoring of the particularities of that specific person at that time,
Yes.
of that lineage. So I think God sees us as particulars. And as particulars, we are valuable, and our particularity ought to be celebrated. And you see that in the healings, you see that in variety of encounters that Jesus has. Again, it's not a generic humanity. It's not what often the philosophers from, especially in the 19th century, were highly critical of, namely herd. You're kind of lost in a herd. Gospels, though often our masses are before Jesus, one doesn't have impression that Jesus treats people as a part of a mass, part of a herd, each individual. And you see that's also stories when herds or flocks are being thematized in the gospel stories. What happens if one sheep gets lost? That sheep ends up being then suddenly more important than 99 that haven't been lost, right? Which is to say, again, particular is important.
That's right. Well, what would be our liturgies and practices in order to regain that sense of the particular love of God for us?
Yeah, that's a little bit beyond my pay grade. I'm a theologian. I think
that's my job, isn't it? As someone in pastoral ministry, well, I'm taking that challenge on, because I think we often do talk in generalities and they sound great. But I know, but particularly as a woman in ministry, and I know when I've been able to show women some of the particular stories of women and Jesus in the Gospels, suddenly the generalities of that love become particular to them in a way that they haven't seen before. So perhaps that's one of my practices that I would have.
You know what? Also, the other passages, again, this colleague of mine, John Hare, he also likes to mention this passage from the book of Revelation, that each of us has a name which nobody else knows. And there's a kind of particularity and the secret of particularity of each individual who are that what they are and cannot be subsumed under a generality by anybody, because nobody knows that name that is given to them by God. And so the kind of mystery that the person is always honored, respected. And you often have also trends in theology which would say that there is a kind of mystery to God. Mystery to God is not a riddle that we kind of try to figure out and then we know. But in similar way, there is a mystery to each individual. Each individual is a kind of mystery to us, inviolable in many ways. We don't kind of solve the riddle of a person and then see the entirety of the person like an open book before us. The mystery stays, and mystery ought to be honored. And mystery is really what is beautiful and unique and worthwhile in a person.
A lot of this is going into thinking about how do I retain that in how I interact with people as a pastor. Now, you mentioned the incarnation already, and if you think about Philippians 2 and that downward movement that's in there that sort of redefines what glory is, what does that, I think, reveal about God's ambition, I suppose, if we use that word?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of Martin Luther. And in one of his texts, it's his commentary on the song of Mary when she went to see Elizabeth. My soul magnifies the Lord. And he talks about this magnifying of God. And then he describes God. And he says, well, God is the highest above all, which means that there's nobody that's higher than God. Therefore, God never looks up.
Yes.
Because there's nobody there, nothing there. There's no equal to him. God, therefore, never looks to the side.
Yes.
God always looks down. He's seen the lowliness of a servant. And so you have this idea that there is a kind of humility of God who always doesn't care about preserving his own greatness, but looks down and associate with those who are lowly, with us as humans. And Luther contrasts that with ordinary people who, whenever they're in the crowd and they're there in the party, let's find somebody who is the most famous. I come closer to him. And so that some of that fame is kind of rubbed off of me, and we like to associate with those who are successful, those who matter, those who are significant. And I think the story of our God is that God is a humble God, and that's most clearly visible in what happens when Jesus Christ comes and becomes a servant and dies on the cross for us.
Yeah, this is a very challenging thing as a pastor, of course, and we're constantly compared. I work with a retired pastor, and he says he just works for me part-time, and he says, it's wonderful not being the senior pastor. I don't ever have to check the attendance or the offertory. I just go home. I love it. So just for pastors and leaders who constantly compared, and I feel like we pastors have entered into the sort of capitalist system of comparison, attendance, platforms, influence, etc. What disciplines are going to help us? How are we going to change our hearts?
But I think even before disciplines, it seems to me that we ought to question whether a certain analytic tools of quantitative nature actually can adequately capture what is going on in the lives of people and what is actually happening. I'm thinking how Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, he pays a great deal of attention to interiority, what's happening inside of the person. If it's instead of simply thinking about action of harming someone, murder, for instance, he talks about anger, what's going on inside. But often you don't know what's going on inside. Inside is hidden to others, and it's not very easy to measure what is the level of spiritual growth that is happening inside. We can measure consequences, but not, again, interiority, as we talked earlier as well. And so to me, that seems to be really, really significant. And the entire ministry of Jesus does not seem to me to be at all oriented toward quantitative growth. It just is not there. And I think we make a mistake when we organize our lives around that. And I think it's because our own sense of proper growth is often unpredictable. It's hard to measure. And the closeness of somebody to God can be more valuable than more seats in the church or more money in the offering plate. as important as both of these, related as these tend to be, are. And it seems to me that's a mistake to go that route from the beginning. And I think we are infected by standards of success in the society that is around us.
You're smashing my idols.
That's why I'm here. My idols too. So in my case, it is how many books how many copies has your book sold, and and so forth. What kind of reviews have you gotten? And I always have to talk to myself about it, and I have to ask myself a question: is this really the measure? Is it possible to be right and not to be perceived to be right? Is it possible to be right and be rejected precisely because one is right? It doesn't mean that you're right if you're rejected, of course. But on the other hand, rejection or acceptance aren't measures of success of the truth of what I'm after. And so, in that sense, I have to tell myself I've got to be faithful, and that's what Jesus says in one point. What's expected of servant is to be faithful. And in this faithfulness matters more than any quantity, because it's really what attends to the preciousness of those unique self. When I was about teenager, I kind of despised my father, as teenagers do, and my father happened to be a minister. And he had a church, 150 members, right? Small church. But at one point when I was writing a little bit about the church, I called it Church of the Weird. There were so many weird people in that church, and I could kind of list varieties of weirdnesses of the people. I knew them all, characters, because I was 4 times a week I was in the church. That's what we did, and I kind of thought, why is my father spending his time with those losers? Why doesn't he do something much more worthwhile? And it took me a while, and then I realized he is doing absolutely beautiful work of God. These people who are kind of certain kinds of misfits, they're part of a church. Patience with them, love for them. What a beautiful thing it is, because they're worth exactly as the richest, most successful person is, and quantitatively, one ought not to gripe about them being part of that great crowd that are there but celebrated.
So would you call that a kind of a holy unambition, perhaps, that ability to see the worth of, say, the hidden life?
Yeah, you may call it that way if you think of ambition as simply kind of in this domain of visible, right?
Yes.
But if you think of it, of what is excellent in God's kingdom is attention to that which is broken, attention to that to which nobody attends. What is significant is inner development, slow growth of inner life. What is significant will be only once revealed, and none of us are able to judge either ourselves or the work that we are doing. And that's what Apostle Paul actually says in 1 Corinthians, I think in 1 Corinthians 3 or 4. He says, I don't judge myself, right? And I shouldn't be judged by you either. It's the one who judges us properly, and therefore there's a kind of sense of trust that work is sows the seed, and it will grow, and one ought to attend to folks who need.
It's in my sort of journey as a minister, I think I've moved in that way from fear of there's absolutely no way to judge what I'm doing. It's unquantifiable. Yeah. How can I even know whether I've done, almost into a sense of freedom in that, that I don't have to hold on to that judgment. I found that quite freeing. I'd have to talk to my congregation and so on. But
yeah, I think that's exactly right. Obviously, this can be misused, right? Can be excuse for not attending properly, but need not be. And for the most part, when I observe people, it isn't. It is an attempt to be faithful.
Well, Thanks so much for joining us on With All Due Respect, Miroslav. Miroslav is the author of this new book, The Cost of Ambition, How Striving to Be Better Than Others Makes Us Worse. And there's a challenge on every page. We didn't talk about Milton and Kierkegaard, who feature as kind of players in this book, but also it finishes with 24 theses, not quite 95, but 24 theses. It's well worth, I think, all Christians reading it. So do pick it up and you'll have Miroslav promises not to check the sales number. Is that right?
At least if I check not to compare with my competitors.
There you
Correct.
go.
Thanks for joining us. Still to come. Ambition might have all sorts of dangers, but it does make for gripping stories. We look at one next, the Forsytes. Through the Wardrobe, finding truth through story. The Forsytes is a TV period drama adaptation of the Forsyte saga novels by John Galsworthy. The show came out last year. It's available on ABC in Australia. It's set in the late Victorian era in Britain and chronicles the lives and fortunes of 4 generations of an upper middle class stockbroking family. How crass. That's the whole point, right? They are an example of the new money of this period and the rise of the middle class. Thus, ambition is a central theme to the novels and this show, which centres itself on Soames Forsyte, who is very much a man of ambition. Have a listen to this trailer.
What is a Forsyte? A Forsyte is someone who knows the value of family and loyalty.
We have been preeminent among London's stockbroking elite. Has the time come to pass over the reins to my son, Joe?
Do I think I'd be the better chair? Of course. Do I need to stoop to scheming to achieve it?
So here we are. Here we are. Let battle commence.
A man needs an ambitious wife if he's to scale the heights. It's high time he was seeking an advantageous match.
Now, Megan, why are we so drawn to tales of ambition? There was that other one about New York, the Gilded Age. The Gilded Age. And then I would say Succession is one about our own age, isn't it?
Yes, I haven't watched Succession. I think because it's not on one of my streaming services.
I think I had to buy it.
Oh, no.
But yeah, that's it's an amazing tale in a similar sort of saga
I kind
fashion.
of like them and I hate them.
Yeah?
Like, House of Cards, which is also about ambition.
Yes.
I kind of coped with the British one and then I had to give up on the American one. Yeah. Like, it just did me in. Like, I was just too...
Too what? Too intense?
Just people were just so unsympathetic. Mean? Yeah. And I feel like that. So what was your response to this?
Well, I did say before, so Megan's hinting at what she already knows. I thought it really was not a very good adaptation. So the Forsyte saga was there was a massive series in the late 60s that my parents absolutely loved. It goes for about 28 episodes. This one, I just felt like it was so shiny and weird and kind of a bit cliched, not very. It wasn't gripping to me. And also the haircuts. I got to say, some of the blokes look like Simon Le Bon or George Michael. I mean, it just didn't kind of make sense.
It was a post-Bridgerton TV show, which I really liked Bridgerton.
Including weird casting of people of colour in strange roles that are historically inaccurate.
Maybe you're too old for this.
Well,
but anyway, you haven't...
This is the grumpy old man speaking. Yeah.
You haven't actually read the books, have you?
I haven't, though I would like to, yeah.
So I read the books, so if we come back to those and...
That's a power move right there.
Yeah.
But go on.
And when I was quite young, Michael, and I've always, I really found the books gripping and interesting, and I've been quite enjoying the latest series, but Soames Forsyte, who's really the central character of the books, is so unpleasant.
Yes, he's got a moustache, so you know.
Well, he feels like, when you read it, he feels like someone that should have a moustache.
Right, okay.
Sorry to any of our moustachioed listeners at this point. But even though it's so funny because even though you don't like this central character, you kind of keep listening or you keep reading. There's just so much mess, though, from ambition. Like, I think that's like the consequences just going to get out of control.
And it's partly being in a society that doesn't accept you just on the basis of the fact that you've succeeded. It's because, I mean, this is the tension, isn't it? You're an upper middle class family who's got all the money in the world, but you're still seen as parvenus. You're still seen as outsiders by those who are in the know because those who are established.
They want acceptance from the old elite, if you like.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, they like your money, but they don't ever really accept you, and you're desperate for acceptance. And so there's that kind of horrible tension in it too. And it's sort of, we see like tragedies. We see how these vices corrupt people who might otherwise be good or who are successful in other ways. So that's the kind of interest that strings us along.
And I think the thing is, and so Succession, I believe, I haven't seen it, we've never seen it, often also ambition around families, because it's not just an individual ambition. And so it can kind of seem, I think, much more acceptable in the sense of it's for us as a family and my loved ones, and I want us all to do well and to have, and actually that is not necessarily on the level that you get in something like the Gilded Age or the Forsyte sagas, but that's actually, I think, a common Australian ambition.
It is.
An ambition for your children, an ambition for your family.
We will do anything. We sacrifice anything on the altar of our children. I think we justify anything on the basis of that. I'm doing it for my kids.
It's kind of the acceptable one.
Yeah. I defrauded the bank for my kids.
But yet just as dangerous in a way.
Awful.
Because you're still putting your family above other families.
It's a form of idolatry. I mean, even the fact that if I say that the family is a sort of idolatry in middle-class Australian life, hear how weird that sounds to say. I mean, I would say, look, I'm about to say something that you won't believe I'm about to say, and that is, I would say, even the private schooling system, the idea that we would pay masses and masses of dollars for this.
I mean, some people will.
It's very ambitious.
Yes.
And it's partly this ambition we project onto our children. And
dangerous for our children. Like, I know, I mean, my kids went to public school, but no surprises there. But still, I do know this tension within myself of wanting the good things for my children and having to sort of constantly sort of interrogate myself, is that a good thing? And am I helping them in the way that I am, very keen for them to do academically well, for instance?
Absolutely. And the thing is, I think for us to interrogate whether we really want it for our families or whether our families have just become projections of ourselves. And that's hard to do. That's very hard to do. But there it is. And it's a great way that people get us because an ambition gets us because it makes us, it kind of dignifies what can be quite voracious and nasty.
And it feels less selfish, but it's still us and them. I mean, you get the same thing, I think, with nations, as we've talked about already. And I think with the church, we can get to that where we want our Christian tribe, our particular church, our particular denomination, our type of Christian. Yeah. Like it's that sort of the love of the community that you belong to, which is not a bad thing. Like patriotism, not necessarily a bad thing, which we should have an episode about sometime. Yes. But when it's at the detriment of other groups, other communities, other families.
Or it's a justification for doing what is it. I can do whatever I like because of this great cause. And I think, that's again, a kind of ethical principle that Christ doesn't let us get away with, which is justifying the means by the ends. Because for him, in the Christian thinking, the means and the ends are the means are the ends. How we do things
is important.
It's important, you know. So again, now going back to the show.
I don't know if we've sold it as a show to watch.
No. I think there are other ambition shows. There are other similar shows. I think what it is doing is though it is taking the pulse of the current zeitgeist, as you say. It's sort of like we're fascinated by this
there seems to be an uptick of these kind of shows at the moment, which I think is mirroring our culture, which has become a bit more nakedly ambitious, perhaps.
That's right.
And so we do need to take that pulse. We do need to look in the mirror.
Yeah, and we do like looking at awful characters. I mean, it goes back to, by the way, I would say Macbeth is a tragedy about ambition.
Yes.
He talks about vaulting ambition, which is pricking the sides of his intent.
I played a witch in Macbeth, by the way. Sorry, that's getting off.
Well, I didn't play Richard. I played Macbeth.
You played Macbeth. See, hear the ambitious note in how he said that, right? Yeah.
Well, give it a watch if you want to, and if you want to see some haircuts that look like 1980s pop stars, give the Forsytes a bit of a run.
Did you have a haircut like that when you were there?
A little bit, maybe.
Okay. Well, thanks for being part of With All Due Respect. Coming up next episode, if ambition makes a gripping story, then what about crime? Podcasts like ours actually find it hard to compete with one of the reigning genres of podcasts, which is true crime.
In Australia, the mushroom murder trials had us all fascinated for months, including attendant podcasts.
I was listening to some, I have to say.
Me too. Is this a healthy interest? What's behind this fascination? Join us next time to investigate true crime with your magnifying glass, etc. Intrepid detectives, with all due respect. With All Due Respect is hosted by Megan Paldetrois and by me, Michael Jensen. It's produced by the lovely Derek Yeo. The editing has been done by Alec Green and Graciela Adifun. With All Due Respect is part of the Hope Media Network. We're delighted to say it's on Radio 103.2, so go to hope103.2.com.au and click onto our Facebook page to join in the debates with All Due Respect.